Welcome, YouTube family, and welcome to another video of The Kevin Strong Show. And in this video, we're going to briefly talk about, did you really get a raise last year? But more importantly, are you going to get a raise in this year, in 2022? And if so, is it really a raise? So let's talk about that briefly before we get into the article. As you can see here, it's posted up here. U.S. companies are expecting to pay an average of 3.4% of a raise to workers in 2022. So I just did a quick Google search, just a snippet, just to get some idea, which we all know what the word means, but it basically said lift or move to a higher position or level. Now, that was a textbook definition of the word raise. So I ask you guys, even before we get into this article, if inflation is 7.9%, or they're projecting it somewhere around 7.9% right now, which is grossly underestimating the real inflation percentage, is probably close to somewhere between 15 and 18%. That definitely was the case last year. This year, I think easily you can factor in a 10 to 12% handle on inflation. Opinions vary, but my point being, what is a 3.4% raise going to do? Let's just say, for discussion purposes, if you get inflation at 10%, right? That puts you at 6.6% below what you need, where you need to be just to match inflation. So I think when people from a common sense standpoint think of, did I get a raise? Very few people, especially in the W-2, in the middle class sector, really factor in, am I keeping up or am I beating inflation? Because just because there's a higher numerical value that shows up on your digital paycheck, if that number isn't equal to or greater than inflation, your purchasing power is being eroded. It's simply that simple. One of the other things that I'd like to talk about before I dive into this article is that if you've been noticing for the last couple of years, the rising rate at which house prices are going up. People can't afford the payments. Everybody structures most of their lives on their debt. And their debt is kindly broken down. Their debt is normally broken down based on their monthly obligations. People buy payments. They don't buy value. It's all about the payment. So as long as the interest rates, talking about housing right now briefly, was at historically low levels, people really didn't mind plunging for houses that may or may not be able to sustain their value. Now, that opinion may vary, but the point I'm trying to make here is that you really have to understand that wherever you are in the economic ladder, it's incumbent upon you to figure out a way to beat inflation. And if you have the type of job where you can't get the type of raise, then you're going to constantly be having to figure out ways to reduce your spending each year, right? So there's two ways to do it. You either beat inflation by making more money or reducing your expenses. So without further ado, let's get into this article. Like I said, it talks about how on average companies are only going to pay 3.4% raises to workers in 2022. And as I alluded to at the beginning of this video, that's grossly below where inflation is projected to be at the end of this year. So as you can see down here, they're talking about that growth would be higher than in 2020 and 2021, and is expected across all types of positions, regardless of seniority. So this could be very misleading. I'm not making any political references here, but when you start talking about the labor market is tight and we need jobs, are those said jobs able to is a person able to sustain a livelihood on that job? These are a lot of service workers, low skill workers. I don't see a lot of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 jobs that aren't being filled. Now they are, but those type of jobs do not make up the lion's share of this number when the media starts coming out and starts talking about a tight labor market. They're talking about particularly jobs probably below $20 an hour and under, which is $40,000, just for simple math. So once again, the U.S. employers expect to pay an average of 3.4% raises to their workers in 2022. We covered that. I want to go down here. Inflation is an element of it, but that's not the sole factor. Okay. Leslie Jennings, Senior Director of Work and Rewards at Willis Towers Watson. I think the bigger piece is about this race for talent. So just think about that verbiage for a second. The race for talent. This particular verbiage is totally not addressing the housing affordability crisis. People's, once again, their wages are not keeping up with food, inflation, gas prices, heating, shelter. These are things that are squeezing the middle class and pushing people down to a lower economic class. That's the thing that people are frightened about. So I think it's somewhat disconcerting that this particular person, or this lady, I'm assuming it's a female, is saying that the bigger piece is the race for talent, as though talent is going to solve inflation. You see where I'm going with that? That doesn't address the need of your paycheck being large enough for you to handle your monthly expenses. Now, the article also talks about here the Great Resignation. Job openings in the U.S. are near all-time highs as a record 4.5 million workers quit their jobs in November, a phenomenon that has been dubbed the Great Recession. Now, I don't really have a dog in this fight. I can't really even speak intelligently as to why so many people have quit. It's something that's happened during this health crisis back in March of 2020 that people's mindset have just changed in terms of they're tired of working long hours. They're tired of not having benefits. They're tired of not getting compensated for the work that they do, rightly so. But as I've said in previous videos, there is an economic reality that you have to deal with if you quit. What is your exit strategy? How do you replace the income that you once had? So I think all of this is going to work itself out. I think it's starting to squeeze people. This video is not about the U.S. savings rate, but when we got the stimulus checks a while back, the savings rate actually went up quite a bit. And all of that money has been spent. People don't have money in the bank like they did 24 months ago. So this all is going to play itself out, I think, in a very negative way, in my humble opinion. Going farther down here in the article, it talks about the labor shortages have been most acute for low-paying in-person jobs such as bar, restaurant, hotel positions in the leisure and hospitality sector. So this is what I alluded to earlier. Some of this stuff can be misleading if you just look at it on the surface and saying, okay, well, what do you mean there's a tight labor market for what type of job? So if you're on the West Coast or even in my area, the greater Seattle area, and you're working full time in the leisure and hospitality sector, I'm here to tell you, you're going to have multiple roommates all contributing just to be able to afford somewhere that's halfway decent and safe. It's just really, really crazy. Not only here in terms of the rent and the high cost of food and everything, but I think that's spreading nationally in pretty much every state relative to that state or that particular area's economic situation. Employers have increased wages to attract and retain employees amid the demand for labor. About 74% of the companies cite the tight labor market as a reason to increase their budget for raises. See, once again, this is not addressing what the problem is. The problem is people can't make enough money to have a quality of life. And there's been a disconnect with that since the health crisis of March in 2020. How we get that back, I have no idea. It's a very, very telling situation. And like I said, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but, you know, make sure that if you are quitting and transitioning into something else, that you have thought this out, and then you do have a backup plan. Overall, 32% of companies increased their salary projections over the course of just a few months. In June of 2021, for example, respondents had budgeted for an average 3% increase in worker pay this year, according to Willis Towers Watson. Once again, that's sounding like, okay, you're getting more money on your paycheck. Yes, that's a good thing, but you don't realize any benefit from it because it gets chewed up by an eroding dollar. Hence inflation. So just a really sad situation here. This last part says higher pay isn't the only way companies are competing for workers. Some are also focusing on career advancement, mental well-being programs, and other workplace elements to keep employees happy and engaged, according to Jennings. So I'm here to tell you, in my humble opinion, I do think we're going to see inflation continue um, in the intermediate. But I think by the third or fourth quarter of this year, in my humble opinion, this isn't financial advice. I know everybody's counting on the fact that the Fed's getting ready to raise these rates, and as a result, all of these things are going to happen. But I'm thinking by the third or fourth quarter of this year, you're going to start to see prices wane. They're going to start to come back down. I think energy prices will start to come down. Food prices should start to come down. The caveat with the food thing is contingent upon the supply chain factor that can affect us, US and globally. I think housing prices will start to come down. And overall, you will see a deflationary factor start to creep into our economy in the third and fourth quarter of this year. Now, having said that, and I've made this analogy in a previous video, but I'm going to reiterate it in this one. If we do get a deflationary hit the latter part of this year, you still may have an income situation where it's still too high for you. Once again, I gave the analogy in a previous video talking about milk and saying, just for hypothetical purposes, a gallon of milk is $5. It goes up to $9 because of inflation, and then it comes back down to $7 because of deflation. But if your wages aren't keeping up with the price of food and services, even though it went from $9 down to $7, you may be at a situation where you still cannot afford that $7 gallon of milk. So from your standpoint, from your pocketbook, from your family's perspective and budget, things are just as bad as they were at the beginning of the year as they are at the end of the year, even though there's been a significant pullback in prices. So what is the answer? If you are in a situation to get out of debt, please do so. I always advocate telling people keep your credit score up and keep your debt down. Do what you can to do that, because it's important that you position yourself to be able to transfer this inflation into an opportunity. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is either to make more money, as I said earlier, or you're going to have to learn how to tighten an already tight belt. So once again, thank you for spending some time with me. This was the Kevin Strong Show. Please do me a favor, comment, like, and share, because you know I care. And please support this channel by hitting that like button. I hope you're enjoying this content because I'm going to continue to do it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.